immense pleasure to extend you a very warm welcome on behalf of the Department of Social Work, Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit, to the third day of the international webinar Aloft on the theme Dislocation and Fragmented Identities, Social Work Responses. I would request Lamia Issa to welcome our distinguished guests and participants to this webinar.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
Good morning to one and all gathered here. It's a moment to immense pleasure to welcome all who are present to attend the webinar. To begin with, I welcome our head of the department, Dr. Jose Anthony Sau. On behalf of the institution, I would welcome the speaker of the day, Dr. Rajendra Baikadi, postdoctoral fellow at Hebrew University of Jerusalem. We are truly delighted with your presence. Next, I welcome our moderator for the session, Assistant Professor Dr. Sunil Kumar, SSUS Regional Center, Payyanur. A warm welcome to Dr. Rishma Bharadwaj, teachers and all participants. We all are assembled here to listen and discuss the eminent speaker of the day. Once again, I welcome everyone who has gathered here. Thank you.
Thank you, Lamia. Now I would like to introduce our speaker, Dr. Rajendra Baikade. Dr. Rajendra Baikade is URC Special Postdoctoral Fellow and Senior Research Associate at the Department of Social Work and Community Development, University of Johannesburg, South Africa. In addition to this, Baikade is a Principal Investigator at the International Socio-Economic Laboratory, Harvard University, United States. His primary research and teaching interests focus on international social work, social change, social problems, global inequality, social welfare, social justice, human rights, critical social work, social policy, and globalization. Dr. Baikadi received his PhD in social work from the Central University of Karnataka and then held a Golda Meir postdoctoral fellowship at Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Israel. He has also held the Confucius Studies Understanding China Visiting Fellowship at Shandong University, supported by the Government of China, and was a recipient of the Taiwan Government Short-Term Research Award for Academic Research at National Chengchi University, Taiwan. He will be speaking on the topic Poverty, Inequality, and Changing Identity, what it means to be poor in the Global South. Before handing over the mic, I would like to introduce the moderator of this event, Dr. Sunil Kumar. He is an Assistant Professor of Social Work, SSUS Regional Center, Payyanur. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to Sunil Kumar, moderator of this event. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, organizers. And once again, a warm good morning to one and all over here. My faculty team, my own gurus, my teaching fraternities and student fraternities are all over the world, and especially to Baiju sir at the midnight. He is a participant in this program. Hi, good morning, sir. So, my dear friends, a person with our adjacent state, see, Baikadi is a nearest place in our location, that's in Karnataka, Udupi. Am I right, sir? So, Rajendra sir, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, okay. I think now you are in Johannesburg or in Baikadi?
No, I'm in Johannesburg.
Okay, thank you. So the concept or the topic that we are discussing over here that is very familiar to you all, that is poverty, inequality, and changing situations or changing identity. But we want to know what is this special to the Global South. So already we are getting delayed and I am not taking too much time yet. The UN states poverty, that means it's the denial of rights, denial of opportunity, denial of positions and all. And that leads to all types of inequality, and that is we can simply observe in and around in our situations and environment. So as professional social workers, as a social member, we want to know how it's happening, and we know the things, but we want to know from our distinguished guests of today, that is what it means, especially to the Global South in the world. So with the permission of the organizers, sir, we have only 45 minutes for our presentation, and after the session, we have a question and answer session also. So in between the participants, there is a humble request. Whenever you feel to raise any questions, please note down, and at the time of question and answer session, please raise it and make the program an ever memorable one, and excuse the resource person in front of you, because you know the profile of our resource person today. So anyways, sir, we are blessed with your presence, and the floor is for you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and good morning, all. I think you haven't crossed the morning time there, of course. Here it is 8:19 in the morning. So I hope you people before 12 now. It's like 11:45 somewhere. So, and thank you for inviting me to this webinar conference, which I feel is a privilege, of course, to talk to you all. And thanks to Sunil sir for recognizing Baikadi, which is very next to Udupi, because most of the people don't usually recognize that where is Baikadi actually. So I'm very thankful to you for recognizing or locating it exactly in Udupi. So, and of course, now I'm not in Baikadi since last 7-8 months. I'm in Johannesburg. So I came here for my postdoctoral research, and I'm a postdoctoral researcher here. And I also want to correct it, like, of course, in the introduction, you gave me a proper introduction of University of Johannesburg. In the poster I have seen, it's mentioned University of Hebrew University of Jerusalem, which was my earlier affiliation before coming to Johannesburg. So I was there for an year, and then I came to University of Johannesburg. So with this, I'll start my topic, poverty, inequality, and changing identity, what it means to be poor in Global South, where I'll focus on what poverty looks like and what is the importance of that concept to the Global South, and how the development in Global South is changing, or I also try to focus on social work response to poverty, or how we can train our students for responding to poverty, or what we actually lack in our programs, social work programs. So before that, do I have the permission to share the screen? Yes. Thank you.
Yes, sir, please.
Yeah. I will put off my video for the moment. There are not many slides, of course. I have put only few slides, which are, of course, kind of charts where I wanted to show. Other than that, there are points which I'm going to discuss, and most of them, those are the questions which I'm going to ask you to think or even to rethink, rather than I give a lot of explanations or a description for those. So we live in interesting times. I say that is interesting time because more so because of the pandemic in the last 2.5 years, and associated or plus aggravated problems, which I would like to call them as social problems, because they are not one, two. There are many in terms of nature and in terms of human implications, and also in the forms. There are many problems which we are facing at the moment, and also we are going to face in the future. And in fact, we for sure probably approaching the worst economic crisis for at least next few years, if not for a decade. Including poverty and inequality and a lot more associated issues because of the pandemic and the effects of pandemic on economic and development policies and programs which we had for the last 2.5 years. And also, which is also going to cause a lot of insecurity and tensions in terms of public anger in different forms. For example, crime, criminality, mistrust, relational issues, broken families, and altogether a broken system which is in front of us to correct them in many ways. And of course, further frustrations, fear of uncertainty, and about the unknown future is visible. And in each part of the global South society, we see a whole lot of insecure feelings. It may be with the different population group or with the different communities, but we do see that because of the changing societal system or societal situations. And the issues that we are discussing this morning is global in nature in impact. So in nature and impact, the poverty is a global issue, and local in terms of implications, because most of the time it impacts our local societies first, and international in terms of politics, because there is something called poverty politics and a lot of policy discussions which takes place between or within the poverty related issues. So I say it is international in terms of politics because there are a lot of development programs, development policies, and development agendas which are set for poverty elevation or poverty eradication, which is, of course, in terms of international, or it plays an important role in the international level. So to see what the world looks like is like half of the world's poor live in just 5 countries or in the 5 regions of the world, where we see the half of that comes from India, majority of them comes from India, 24%, and Bangladesh, Nigeria, Congo, Democratic Republic, and Ethiopia, and sub-Saharan Africa, where I'm located now or I'm based now, and East and Asia and the Pacific. So if we see this picture, it gives an idea to us where actually the poverty is located or the poor population is located. And because it is the global South, or it is the countries which are developing or underdeveloped or less developed, we call them with different names based on their their economical performance or economic standards, or even living standard, all other indicators which we look for the economic development. So looking at this, and I'll come back to this slide once again in the later to see how it frames our identities, or what is the importance of understanding where we locate, or what's the importance of our region or our place. So we all know the great part of the society, that is a great part of the story, that is the global South is home for unemployment, poverty, inequality, and unequal distribution of wealth and resources. And we all know, like, we have 6.47% of unemployment rate, which was 5.92% 2 decades ago. And South Africa tops the world in terms of unemployment with 29.2% of unemployed population, followed by Sudan, Bahamas, and Armenia and Belgium. So this is where the actual issues, which, because in the mind which comes is like, when we say it is global South, it is the place which is known for the issues like unemployment, inequality, unequal distribution of resources, and of course a lot of associated issues and problems. And we all also know the impact of poverty in many societies is spread across different sections of society, like minority communities, children, women, disabled, and elderly population. So there are a lot of group of or sections of population which experiences the impact and problem associated with poverty. And also, so in this term, we see poverty as an economic crisis, but it is also a social crisis, as it impacts the future of all those who are affected and impacted. And this also brings in the issue of identity as of who is who in the society, because when we talk about identity and the poverty, there is a lot of issues which we which we need to connect and understand, because in the society it is always the economic standard or the living standard of the people which gives an identity for the people. Among other different identities, we do find people's haves and have nots, poor and rich, people with power and powerless. So these are the ways we identify different sections of the society. So that is where the role of poverty or poor population comes into a picture. And also, there are several discussions and debates on who is the loser and who is the winner in terms of economic power. And then there are also debates that says countries in the global south are poor because they are of lack of resources, that are need to stop relying on relying on the developing countries or for the purpose of resources and for the purpose of economic growth, which leads to short-term and long-term problems that deprive them from opportunities and progress. So these are the discussions which are like why global south is poor, or the question itself is like why it is called global south or the developing countries or the less developed countries, and what makes them or what gives them that characteristics, and how they depend on developed countries, and how the development politics or the power politics plays there between the north and the south, global north and the global south. And if there is a power shift which is going to happen, because most of the people say that we need to see or we need to make sure that the power shift happens from the global north to the south in many fields, or of course even in the academic field there is a lot of discussions that why there is a complete dependency on the north or to the west, and why not it is the global south which can develop a whole lot of things, because when we have so lot of resources. But of course mostly it is said that we don't have resources. But then let's see just a minute. Yeah, then let us see how the global south is characterized. Like 85% of the world's people located in the global south, and 20% of the world's wealth is in the global south. And this is how we see our society, because the 85% of the world's population enjoying 20% of the world's wealth, this is what the gross inequality we see, because there is a whole lot of population, and in terms of economic resources or the wealth, which is very less or it is very minimal, which is located there. So that is where we see there is a power politics which plays between within the development or development paradigm, because we see the globalization and the neoliberal market economy or the privatization which was introduced as part of development, which of course contributed to the development. We cannot completely deny that globalization brought in a lot of issues only, but of course most of the time the fruits of this globalization, all privatization, all liberalization is mostly enjoyed by the developed world, not by the developing world. More than that, like for to be clear, most of these developing world or the developing countries were further pushed into poverty because of these policies or the new development, new economic policies which were introduced recently in many countries, and even including some of the developing or well-performing economies in the global south. And also, in this case, so it's clear that economic dependency, which makes global south a weaker society, but then lack of resources in terms of human power, or is it resources, technology, or the talent? So this is the question which we need to ask ourselves. If we say global south is lack of resources, lack of human power or technology or talent, then we also need to see that this is one part of the story, and we need to see who is providing the workforce to the global north, because the lot of people who migrate from the global south or the developing countries to the developed countries for in search of job, employment opportunities, or opportunities, who are the people who actually work there and contribute to their economy or their economic development. So here we can see that 33% of United States job vacancies are filled by the people from outside, 9% in Canada, 30% in Israel, and 54% in Australia, which gives us an idea that in that case, who is actually poor in terms of human power, and who is actually poor in terms of resources. And of course, technology, they are very developed, of course, we can agree that. And of course, in terms of communication, in terms of modern technological resources, they are, of course, developed. But in terms of talent, I think we need to think again, because the population or the migrant population which goes from the global south to the north, which is actually the talented population, which of course we cannot deny that there is a policy or there is a process which is put in to select those people. It is not that anybody can go and work there. So that is where somewhere we need to see that, are we really lack of talent in the global south? And if not, then what's actually happening, or what is the actual problem we are facing? So today I want to want us to rethink some of the concepts which we were told to believe as they are. Like I very much like the title of the webinar or the seminar, which is Dislocation and Fragmented Identities, like social work response, which makes us to think about how and who forms the identities, and what is the role of power in formulation of different identities, and what role the politics at local, national, and international level plays, and most importantly, the changing trends in today's contemporary society, where identities are demanded than tagged. So this is somewhere we need to rethink or question how we can change our global South societies, and how we can understand that whatever the resources we do have within us, and how the society is changing so frequently or so speedily. So I say here, like, identities are demanded and rather than tagged, because before this session, of course, I was there, and there is a lot of discussion about the gender identities and LGBTQs, and of course, those discussions, when we look into so many societies are changing today, because earlier that those were the tagged identities, but now they are the demanded one. So because the people are knowledgeable enough to demand their own identities or to recognize their identities, whereas in the earlier society we didn't have that. So there were tags for those people. Of course, today we do have that stigma, but still there is a lot of changes which we see, and that is what we need to see in terms of other aspects and other identities which are tagged to people as well. So the next part of this presentation is, I would like to think about the possibilities, how we can think about the notion of identities related to poverty, inequality, and their identity in global South societies, and perhaps the untapped resources and path we haven't taken, or the possibilities that we have neglected so far in terms of development of global South societies or the developing countries, largely characterized with a lot of social problems and issues. So let me take back to you to the earlier slide, which I had as the first or second one. Yeah, here, because this says about half of the world's poor population live in the global South. So it's very clear that the global South, which should be powerful in that case, because though poor population which lives here, we do have the resources. Then now let's think about is like where the definition of poverty comes from. Who defines these poverties then, or who the people powerful defining we people who are living in the global South, and who gives an identity as a global South, and purely based on the development path and financial gains, or the power that comes as part of the economy. So these are the questions we need to. Of course, it is very clear that economic power or the financial stand of a country or financial stand of the regions, which decides most of the time power and the, of course, the political power and the will. So that's what we have seen for the longer time of development. And I hear people talking about power shift from global south to global north. Is that going to happen anytime soon? And or it's just a phenomenon that few people talk about? Because the growth which we see presently in the global south is sometimes not very clear that are we going to witness that global power shift from the north to the south? Though we have a lot of resources, we have all kind of resources which are, of course, not properly utilized or untapped resources, including human resource. So that is something which we need to think of. And also, it also reminds me at the moment, I'm working on an international handbook with the international colleagues that particularly focuses on poverty in the global south. And of course, what I understand from this exercise with my collaborators spread across 25 countries in the global south is a great deal of knowledge about what other countries do in terms of poverty and what are the problems they face or what actually constitutes poverty in these countries, what are the causes and what are the different population groups which are facing or facing the issues of poverty. Because I think we need to also see the gender in terms of that, because without giving the identity, I could say, because we have almost finalized the book and we were in the process of final approval of the things. But then I received a request from an author from the Global South Society saying that I want to withdraw my chapter. The thing is that because there is a whole lot of opposition from the authorities, even from my own university and from the village, because the chapter talks about women's power in poverty eradication in a rural area of a country in the global south. So the rural heads or the village heads don't want that women power to be coming into the global discussions, because there is a kind of uncertainties, because we do live in a patriarchal society in most of the places. So we need to understand that as well. And that is where again the power comes into in terms of identities again. So women identities or the power of women, where we understand there as well. And it's also what are the major issues faced and experienced by othermost or less developed countries in the global south, and what may be the workable solution to eradicate poverty in these countries. So there are a lot of discussions which are coming up, failed economic programs or failed public discussion or policy discussions. And there is a lot of other marginalized sections which are facing problems like children's, disabled population, elderly population, health issues of elderly. And all these are the major social issues which actually the global south societies are facing. And having lived, researched, and taught in 3 continents of the world, there is Taiwan, China. I lived in Asia, Asian. Of course, I come from India, and my birth is in India. Of course, I lived in China for an year and Taiwan for even a short time, but I could see most part of the Taiwan within the 2-month time where I stayed there for my research. And Israel is the Middle East, where I stayed for an year. And of course, South Africa, now it is in Africa. So these are the 3 continents. I could understand how the poverty plays a major role. Of course, even though Israel is not, of course, it's a developed country, but of course, understanding the Middle Eastern countries which are facing poverty, or even I think the power imbalance or the power aspects of performance of a country. So these are the things which, of course, I could understand a bit better. And also, let us also look at the knowledge production on poverty, inequality, and identities of the poor and marginalized in global south. So as I said, this large population which comes from the global south, and half of these poor live in the global south. But then we see poverty research which comes from where it comes from. Do we think that is produced by the people in Nigeria or people in sub-Saharan Africa or even in India, Bangladesh, in the international level. So most of the time, our answer should be no, because most of this comes from a different part of the world. And then, of course, we are giving our identities, our discussions to the other people. So that is something which I felt we need to rethink of course. And I think it is important even in terms of social work as well. And like, for example, one of the leading poverty journal being published for 25 years, entire board of the journal comes from the global north. And the journal says that it is the poverty related to poverty studies. And except the editorial assistant who comes from global south, all other are from the global north. And we see here a statistics that says that the half of the poor population lives in the global south. And of course, who are discussing these issues then? The people who are taking decisions about these, who are they? And also, the apparently more than 90% contributions are from the north, global north, with a few exceptions. And then those who few are authors not based in global south. Of course, rather they are migrated people, non-residential citizens of developing countries. Then, of course, there is the question of identity. Let us see who are discussing about us or who are writing about us and our problems, which we experience, but somebody else is writing about that. So that is somewhere we need to think of again. Another international scholarly journal focusing on development issues, again, which is related to poverty or development aspects, being published for last 58 years, consists 99% of its board from the global north. And apparently a large number of contributions are from the global north, which again gives us an idea that who are discussing our problems, who are giving us an identity, who are saying that these countries are poor or these countries are facing these problems and these countries are not able to solve these problems. So this is something which we need to rethink, of course, again. And does this have something to say about identity? If so, why the global south is not in a position to speak up for, like for ourselves? Can't we speak for ourselves? And is it our inability or earned or learned helplessness? So this is the questions which I put forward. And I think each one of us need to think about this. And of course, I think in social work academia, we do have a lot of discussions. I think it goes along with that. And the most important question is to ask, do we need someone else to speak for our story? Or do we need others to write our stories? Can't we write our own lived experiences? So do we need someone else to write about that? Like, for example, the poverty in African continent is written by somebody in the north, global north, and how we can interpret those issues. And of course, can we understand the differences by the person who is writing, who is lived those experiences, and the person who is observing? And of course, at another example, which I would give is like most of us know about the world university ranking. And of course, most of us discuss about this as well. And we also know these high-ranked universities are located in global north. But what part of this story most of us may not know is around 25 universities within the ranking of 500s are located in global south. And China alone accommodates these 25 universities. And indeed, the change is visible as we can see developing countries are slowly finding their places, including Indian universities, which are slowly coming to the picture in the recent past. But of course, the moment when it comes to global ranking of universities, again, knowledge production and educational contribution, it of course, we look at the global north. And it is also times to think what actually preventing these institutions. So of course, I'll go back again, like if we say, if there is a power shift happens, how it happens, and what are the aspects we need to focus on that then. And yeah, from here, now I will move to the question what government can do or what we can what we expect from the government and what government can perform in terms of poverty and poverty elevation programs. So this is a chart which gives us an idea the world as 100 people over the last 2 centuries, and we can see that extreme poverty is reducing, basic education is improving, literacy is decreasing, illiteracy is decreasing, and literacy is improving. Democracy, most of the countries are moving towards democracy, and vaccination, of course it is not related to COVID vaccination, it is the in general other vaccination policies which we have based on that, and also child mortality, which is decreasing. But at the same time, we go to the next one, we see where these changes are mostly seen, and who actually performs better. So this is where actually we see the countries which are well developed, or the countries which are performing good in terms of their economy, are performing better in these terms. And also there are a lot of other discussions which we see is like there is who are these 100 people then, and what about the other people, other left out people in this society? So it is like it's a very smaller number of population which we look into 100 peoples as performance. So, and this gives us an idea of the global distribution of wealth at the global level. Like we can also see that 1% is enjoyed by the population, and how the shift happens from percentage of adults, and even in the wealth share within the different classes of people. Like millionaire are the 1% of population, and poor people and middle class and miserable population, which is the largest population in terms of the adults, 55% of population, we see that, and how that frames an identity for us as a poor. And also the income gap, or the income, while globally income inequality or global inequality is falling, gap between the haves and have-nots is increasing drastically, or we can see a continuous shift in that. And there is a lot of wealth inequality within the society and among the countries, or among the societies which we experience and we see. And of course, most of them are contributed by our recent development programs, or modern development programs. And also proportion of unemployed population living below $1.90 a day in 2019 is percentage, which we can see again total youth and adults, which gives an idea of again less developed countries, and in terms of world. So the major contribution again comes from the less developed countries, or the countries which we call as the global south. And this is one which I explained. And of course, looking at a proportion of total population effectively covered by the least, at least on one social protection programs or policies, because this is also one of the issue which we face in the global south or in the developing countries. So in the world, it is 46.9 population covered by at least one social protection benefit, and vulnerable persons covered by social assistance is just 28.9. And if we see upper middle income countries, it is 64 and 34. And of course, low income countries, it is only 13.4%, and vulnerable person, it is 7.8%. And going back to the first slide where we see the large number of population poor people live in global south, we see a whole lot of differences in this. And of course, we need to rethink what kind of policies we have in terms of welfare. And also poverty reduction effect of the welfare programs, how they are performing, and type of social assistance programs like cash transfer or pure cash transfer, public work, and social pensions, which is of course not performing as very well, especially in the developing countries or in the global south. And also inequality in terms of inequality reduction, again, the type of social assistance program which is in the developing and developed countries in the most of the part of the world, which is again, we need to rethink our policies or welfare programs. And of course, going back to what social work can do, or because I know most of us are from social work background, and I also had an experience of working on a special issue on poverty, teaching poverty in global south societies for the social work students, and where I could see a lot of contributions which came from Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Vietnam, and all other, who majorly focused on our conceptual and skill development aspects of social work students in addressing poverty is something we need to rethink. And also, we need to build attitude building and knowledge development, skill and ability development of social work students is something which is again lacking within the social work academia. And also conceptual framework of teaching poverty, theorizing poverty in social work is something which we need to work a lot. So going back to my beginning statement, we live in a interesting time where societal trends, that is rapid change in demography, reduced public funding, and dramatic shift in social values, which is actually demanding the service profession like social work to be proactive in their service and programs. And we should also understand that poverty in the global south is not lack of resources, but it is lack of well-thought economic policies or poor economic strategies, in addition to poor welfare provisions. And also rethinking development in contemporary world is something which we need to do as, of course, need of the hours. And also, I think we need to focus more on the sustainable development goals, which are 17 goals, which are given to the globe. And of course, we have already completed several years in this, and we have only 9 more years left. And at least to my knowledge, I don't know much which is done on sustainable development goal. Recently, we have started working on this, especially on knowledge production, and to see how these sustainable development goals are addressed in different aspects of social work practice, education, and research. So this is something, once again, of course, the countries in the north are taking more lead because of the benefits which they have, resources and other facilities. But of course, countries in the developing countries, or in the countries in the global north, south are not, of course, performing better. So to conclude, government policies, the legal system, access to capital and technology, the efficiency of industrial production, inequality in distribution of land, labor resources, and some of the characteristics of, these are some of the characteristics of global north against the counterpart or the characteristics of or the consumption pattern of the global north. So we need to see that these are the factors which are framing our identities in the global north, and we need to develop a program or the policy which largely focuses on these aspects of the development and helps in understanding what we actually what actual problems are faced in the global south. And of course, as I said, we need to take our own voice in bringing these problems to the forefront or to the global community to discuss, rather than someone else is talking about these issues. So I hope I have done justice to the topic of the webinar, and I conclude here, and I'm open for the questions.
Thank you, sir, for an informative session, and covered almost all the areas. And the question is right, shows your means justify the theme, and gave almost all informations regarding the concerns and to the point. And my dear participants, it's the time for question and answer, and you can raise your questions.
Sunil, can you also tell them that they can ask the questions in Malayalam if they want? We can always translate it. They can also, like, write it in the chat box.
Yes. Hello. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, participants, please, your questions, please.
Okay, so shall I begin?
Oh, why not? Most welcome, please.
It was an excellent presentation, and thanks, Dr. Vaikadi. There is a, like when you go, especially writings and research on urban poor, we come across these kind of very divergent views by the theoreticians. On one hand, you have this view of poor people as very creative, resourceful, resilient. The extreme end being the Dharavi being a tourist spot to see this very resilient urban poor people. That's one end of the extreme spectrum. And on the other hand, we have this notion of the poor people, uh, like completely overwhelmed by the structural inequalities and oppression and domination that is around them, which push them into these positions of deprivation and resource inaccessibility. Uh, how can we is there a need to combine these two positions and to have a much more clearer dialogue with the dialogue where the voices of the people themselves can be heard and incorporated into the policy decisions? That is one question, and affiliated with that question is the other question about the developmental goals. Like we have this Millennium Development Goals, and we have seen that it's not because of the lack of goals that things are not getting done. We have had goals for a long time, and even the Millennium Development Goals does not address the issues of structural inequalities or non-responsive governance system that is happening, which never allows us to achieve these goals. So how does governance, how can this governance system be addressed in a poverty politics?
Okay. Thank you for that question. So I think to address the first one, policy deliberation, I think most of the time where the discussions comes from plays a major role because, as I said, sometimes it may be like who are writing about that or who are bringing those discussions into the larger society or to the larger platforms. That I think that decides most of the time. As I told you, I think it is the people who experience that, if they come to the forefront of the discussion, then of course there is a whole lot of changes which we can bring in, and we can understand the lived experiences of them rather than somebody else who is discussing about that. I think even it goes to the same to the indigenous population or to the tribal population, which of course plays a major role, major population of these developing countries. In many countries, we see this population mostly, and of course, at the same time, who decides these policies or the programs is also important, as I said, because do we have our say in these? Like, as coming from the global south. We, in the sense, like, though our system, most of the less developed countries, of course, in terms of population or in terms of economic contribution, in terms of GDP or whatever we see in these countries. For example, like I understand we have 43 countries in 48 countries in the Asian continent and 54 countries in Africa. But where we stand in terms of decisions in the policies related to economic policies, do we have major role to play in that? Though there is industrialization and industrial development and investment and all these things, why it doesn't happen from the global south perspective, or why global south policymakers or even the administration has nothing much to say about that. So that is somewhere I think we need to see. And of course, there is a need for these discussions. And that's what I said. If we think of the power shift, then how that happens. So that is something I think which, of course, all the disciplines need to come together. Of course, economics most of the time, and development professionals and development disciplines which studies, and of course, the practitioners of development, all these people together. And to address the Millennium Development and Sustainable Development, I agree that Millennium Development Goal didn't achieve most of the issues which were there, of course, and that is where that was taken further as Sustainable Development. But to be a bit clear, I think Sustainable Development Goals addresses most of the issues, of course, which were not addressed in the Millennium Development Goal. And that is why we have here 17 goals which are spread across different aspects. And of course, everything which we do now is connected to one or the other goal. But the problem again is with the implementation. And of course, in the Global South, how and who takes the role or the lead in implementing these goals, and how they are performing, and how we keep track of these performance, because it started in 2015, and of course we are almost 6 years ahead, and 2030 we will finish those. And of course we have so much to achieve, but there is much is achieved. Of course, inequality is one of the major areas there. Inequality in different terms, different forms need to be addressed within this global sustainable development goal, but they are not happening, of course, because that's where we see a lot of societies which comes in different forms of inequality we face. Of course, it is gender, race, of course, income, wealth distribution, and opportunities in terms of opportunities. So all of these issues which we need to discuss. And of course, I think who takes the role, and how the power imbalance in terms of bringing them to the discussion table is also something important. And also, as I focused on, where we bring in the literature on this is also something which is we need to think of, because that's what informs the policies which we frame or programs we bring in to address this. And most of them, if they come from the north, or the contribution are from the north, then of course I don't think something which we can really look into global south societies. Rather, we give a picture which is not very clear, or not very realistic in terms of what we experience in the global south. I hope I have given the answer, which is.
Thank you, sir. Dear participants, your questions, please. If there is any language barrier, please raise your question in Malayalam also.
Of course, I think if even they can add on, or if they have any additions to make, they are free to do. I think this should not be a question itself. I think they can even add on their perspectives.
So may I have one question.
Yes, please.
So regarding the global north and global south, the human resource, I think the global south is blessed with the human resource, and no one else state that the poverty is only because of the economic backwardness, or it is because of the lack of utilization of available human resource and natural resources. And leaving the natural resources, how we can utilize the global south population or human resource for poverty eradication and to reduce the gulf between inequalities, or the poor's haves and have-nots.
Okay. Yeah, I think, of course, again, interesting question, because as I showed there, of course, we actually, like a lot of population which migrates from here to the north is the one which is contributing to the north society in terms of human population or human resource to develop their economies. So if we look at that, developing that in our system, it's most probably the programs which we have in our societies which we need to rethink. And of course, I think the state has a lot to do with development. State is not only the funding, of course, states in the terms of planning, and states in terms of planning the effective utilization of the resources which we have, and of course contributing in different ways, because human population or the human resource we have large of course, and we have abundant, but at the same time the skill development part is lacking in our global south societies, in almost all developing countries, because of course its lack of educational opportunities, its lack of science and technological development, or its lack of course opportunities to further develop their personalities. And this is what we need to address in the first, because skill development, of course, now the at least a few states are focusing on that, or the governments are focusing on that skill development, because of course I think the policy which we have in India is like make in India or made in India, somewhere which we say that we are developing our own. So giving opportunities to our own talents or our own abilities rather than depending on others. And that is something. But when we go to that, we also need to focus more on that. We develop the skills, attitude, and the knowledge and the abilities which are required for our human resource, which we can utilize to the fullest for our economic development. As of now, that is where we are lacking, because we have human resource, but largely not trained, or largely unskilled, or largely not able to perform what our economy is actually demanding, our growing population and changing society, or the contemporary society is demanding. So that we need to focus more on training them.
Thank you, sir. So there is one question in the chat box. What role do social movements and community organizations play in sustainably lifting the poorest in middle-income countries out of poverty?
Yeah. To be clear, I don't think clearly I can point out the social moments, but in general, I think there are a lot of course, one of the theme of the conference or this webinar is dislocated population or dislocation and fragmented identities. And I think even if we look at Indian context itself, like the development displacements, the people who are displaced because of the development programs and development initiatives by the states or even by the private state-private partnership, fighting for their human rights or fighting for their rights. It's something which is community organizations playing a major role in that. And also, I think the areas where state is not able to invest or state is not investing, that is where the community development organizations or the, of course, even I think we can go beyond that, like is community, sorry, we can go beyond that is like NGOs or the non-governmental organizations which are focusing on that. Or because I think countries where we have a democratic society where the social movement or social or community organization has major role to play in these issues of displaced population and people with poverty and all. But of course, in the authoritarian government, we can't see that, because authoritarian government, we see the social movements are not functional, or the community organizations are functional, but they do whatever the state says. They are just a part of the state rather than going against to the state. But I think in the democracies, we see this organization play a major role in bringing people's voice to the mainstream, and of course, keeping track of the development programs in most of the places, and to see that they are in line with the requirement of the people, rather than just development program for the few affluent population groups or to the communities.
Sir.
Can you differentiate between rural poverty and urban poverty, addressing the differences between the students of both scenario? I think I should bring out one from the one which I explained you, the special issue article, when there was one article which was looking at people of social work and other disciplines, which of course again came up with the idea that social work students largely lack the knowledge or the conceptual and theoretical skills which are required for addressing poverty issues in the global South societies. We do address a lot of issues related to poverty, but at the same time, the problem is that we don't teach them how to address that. Rather, we teach them what is poverty, types of poverty, definitions, and all these things we can see in our curriculum. I think if we go to curriculum analysis, we can easily find all of these things which are put into there. But at the same time, largely as social problem and particularly as poverty, we don't address directly like how to address these issues, apart from a few places where we can see the changes are happening. But what I think that is where somewhere we need to focus majorly in terms of social work. And also urban poverty and poor poverty, I think, rural poverty and urban poverty, addressing the differences between students of both scenarios is like, in fact, I think rural poverty and urban poverty, the two different concept, of course, I think, because, for example, the person or the student who is in Kerala or even Karnataka, the rural areas where they are based in, and the people who are based in the metropolitan cities, there is a whole lot of differences in their understanding of the poverty, because, of course, they usually see the slums, and, of course, even I think I can bring back my experiences of conducting my field work with these people. And of course, I did my field work in the metropolitan cities in India with social work students. And I could understand social work students' understanding of social problems and how they address that in social work is like they were so happy when they were taken to rural camps, because at least they can see the rural areas and understand what it is, because that gives us a clear picture that how we live in a society and how they perceive it from the knowledge or the readings or even from the medias or whatever they see, rather than we experience it as our lived experiences, or like we come up from that particular situation. uh, I think there is the issue is like to see, of course, we need to differentiate between social work and other students as well. And then, of course, I think rural and urban students and how they perceive that, and then formulating our curriculum which addresses both population, because I think maybe in the states of Karnataka and Kerala we may not find people from who are coming from the metro cities to study there, but definitely in metro cities we have the students who are migrating from here to there to go for studies. So that is somewhere we need to focus more when we say it is social work response or to social work educational response to the poverty. There is one more question. Sir, in many countries in the north, there are talks about UPI. Do you think that countries in south should wait to attain the level of prosperity in north to start thinking about such policies? Conditional money transfer to everyone, unconditional money transfer to everyone. Uh, I think this is a bit difficult question to say like yes or no, I think. But I think it depends on the performance which we see. And also, as I said, the problem is not to say we should go for that or not to go for that. But the problem is that how much we are going to achieve out of that. The thing is that like whichever field we see, let us poverty is the most discussed issue or most debated issue, but at the same time we do have a lot of poverty. It's not only in the global south, of course we focused on global south today, but even in the north societies we see poverty, but the experiences are different. And the problem what is today is like the implementation of the programs or the implementation of the policies. So this is, of course, it may go to contribute to a great extent, but at the same time, how effectively we can implement that, and will it reach the least person in the society, or who is supposed to be the beneficiary of that. So that is also something which we need to address, I think, especially in the developing countries where we see a whole lot of corruption which takes place within the policy and program implementation. And that has a lot to do with the situation, or even I think the identity per se to poverty has a lot to do with that as well. So I think governance is something which we need to uh, look there. And then I think we can think of what actually what programs may actually perform. Programs we can bring so much. I think we no need to wait for the global north, as long as we have the good policies and implementation programs and a well planned strategy for implementing that. The problem is in that strategy, actually, even if we think of global development goals or the sustainable development goals, performance of millennium development goal, if we see, we easily understand who performed well and why, and what actually impacted the performance of developing countries or the global south. I think that's it. I don't see any other questions here.
So I have a question. Hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes.
so we know that climate change is acting as a huge burden for eradicating poverty and as well as all for achieving sustainable development goals as well. So when we discuss about, like when I heard about the discussion about poverty and global south and global north divide, there is a huge debate on this climate change, combating climate change in global north and south, and there is a huge demand from global south as well as also in combating climate change. So how do we view this? It's actually will actually negate our power of eradicating poverty or not?
Yeah, thank you for that question as well. And of course, I think when we see poverty eradication, there are so many issues which comes in, of course, and this climate change is one of them. And of course, in Sustainable Development Goal, also they are focusing on climate change a lot, and because that is the recent issues which we are facing, and as we say, global south, which is facing it more, of course. And I think again the politics which comes there is like, I think we all have come across those discussions, like industrial countries are the one which are actually making a lot of impact to the environment, or the issues related to environment or to the climate crises. And when it is come to the developing countries, which are of course less industrialized, but we see there is a whole lot of impositions or kind of focus which is largely on developing countries. I would see it as like a power play, or a politics which plays there. And of course, I think I can bring from my own experience, I would say, like, because that was, I was thinking, of course, I told you I lived in Taiwan for 2 months for my research stay. And what I observed is that whenever I go to shop for buying groceries every day, though I say that I don't want a plastic, but you buy green chili of 100 grams, they will give you a cover. You buy 2 tomatoes, they will give you a separate cover. And you buy two potatoes, they will give you again separate cover. So how many items you buy, you will get that many plastic covers. And my question is that when we have policies in, especially in India, I know there were a lot of plastic eradication, or plastic, no use of plastic, and people who use plastic, we need to impose fines on them, and we need to collect fines, and all those of discussion. So I was literally thinking about this, and the same experience I had in Israel as well. When you go to the open market and you buy different items, you get plastics free of cost along with them. Of course, there may be hidden cost, but they won't charge you, saying that we are going to charge you for the plastic covers. But at the same time, when I say I don't want, and I can put them all together into one plastic, they just give you a smile. So I was thinking that they laugh at you, because I was thinking that then are we people are mad who think that we should not use more plastic? And in that case, I think we need to think that we were who told that this is, we need to reduce this use. So I think we need to rethink there as well. Then who is contributing more to these climate crises, and in what way? And do we bring all these experiences to the discussions? And of course, when we discuss about these policies and programs on that, who plays major role, and how these strategies were formulated, and who says that who is making lot of impact on the climate or climate crises we experience today. I hope it may not be a direct answer which I gave you, but I hope I some informations which I hope that is useful. Of course, I think you can go ahead if you haven't got a clear answer. That's it. I don't see any other questions in the chat box.
Not yet. So we are eagerly waiting for your questions.
Maybe it's already nearing the lunch time.
Yeah, maybe. So if there is no more questions, ma'am, shall we wind up?
Yes.
The last round, the final round. Anyone? Any question, please? Sir, have you any suggestions to the upcoming social workers to intervene in this field?
I think more than social workers, I think, of course, I would say like it's largely about when we discuss about the theme of the conference, and I already told I liked it very much because I think somewhere you are indirectly addressing the identity of the profession which we are into, because we are into a profession which doesn't have its own identity in the country where we are based in. And of course, we are looking for, and a profession which looks for, demands for, or questions for others' identities like poverty or marginalized section or inequality. But we stand in a place where we don't have our own identities in the society. I think of course, the youth, I believe most of these people are younger than us, like in the sense like the masters and of course in the doctoral programs, I think. It's something very important is that we need to demand. So I said it's like the shift is there already, like we demand our identities rather than tagging our identities. So somewhere we need to see that from our professional perspective as social workers and as social work. And I also say, like, let us look at what we have achieved in the last 84, 85 years of our profession and why we didn't do so many things why we couldn't do that. And I think there also we need to understand so many issues, what were the actual obstacles, at least if we look at within the country, and how as an young generation we can address that. Because I think we can't depend on other people. If we were depending on other people, that would have been done by now, I think, because we can't depend on the next generation to come and do that. And the previous generation, which did much, I think in that case, we should say that. And in that way, it is we who need to take that role or lead to get our own identities as social workers and in our own country. So that I think this conference or the webinar will put a like stepping stone to that, of course. So that is where we at least expect our young generation to see how we can, and let us see what went wrong, and making that properly. Because I think it is sometimes very important that when we say we fight for others, we need to learn fighting for ourselves as well. So because it's a very common thing is like, if we are in a good position, of course, we can bring in other people to the good position. That is where as a profession, we need to see that. Otherwise, I think we do so many things as a social workers, but I think somewhere we do have limitations because of lack of professional identities within the country. So, and I would say that is something very important, learning from these all discussions which comes together and which goes into the social work domain, and then rethinking and discussing it further, and to see how we can reformulate those learnings and look for strengthening our profession. This is what my concluding, and I hope we do that.
Thank you. So for the last 60 to 70 minutes, we have intellectual deliberations, discussions, and we came to know that the global North and global South, its differences and identity crisis, especially from the poverty and inequality related identity crisis and the changing trends. And there are a few thought-provoking suggestions and questions from the part of the speaker, that is, who will tell our story or who will write our story? That is the question still remaining to us. So whether we are in North or South, whether we are in India or Kerala or the North and Southern part of India, whatever be the matter, the problem is to identify the situations or poverty related or inequality related changing identity crisis is there. And here also he mentioned that the identity of the professionals also. So when we have power means having power, when we have power, so definitely we can utilize that power for bringing someone into the same power corpus. So this is the time to think about how we can eradicate this poverty and inequality. And as social workers, especially the trained social workers, we want to play a vital role to eradicate this inequality and poverty existing in our country and the global south and global north also. So a highly relevant topic with within a short span of time. I think, sir, you contributed a lot, and it's really an eye-opening session. And thank you. And on behalf of the Department of Social Work, thanks for your presentation and thanks for your presence. And whenever you are coming to India, in your native place, our college campus is very near to you. That's in Kannur, and the headquarters in Ernakulam. So we are inviting to visit our campus also. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all participants for your questions and your involvement in this session. Thank you all faculty team. Thank you all teachers. Thank you the organizers for giving me such a wonderful opportunity to moderate this session. Thank you all once again.
Thank you, sir. And thank you to Madam Reshma Madam and Anish, I think Dr. Anish, and Jose Antony sir, and others I don't know, of course, because these are the people who were there, of course, and I know you people. So, of course, I would definitely see to visit, because there is another college where I teach a course on international social work, Sri Shabarisha College, where last year I taught a full course for the international social work to the students. So yeah, let me see in my next visit to India, I will visit you all. I hope the COVID is going away and we can freely travel hereafter, I hope. Thank you. And yeah. Yes, please.
You should definitely visit us. So,
yeah,
like,
sure.
you know,
Thank you, Sunil sir, and thank you, Baikdi sir, for a wonderful talk. It was a pleasure being a part of it. Now I would like to invite Ms. Fatima Risa to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to have been asked to offer a vote of thanks on the occasion of this international webinar Aloft. On behalf of my university and the entire Department of Social Work here, I'm very happy to extend our deep spended gratitude to all the speakers for sharing the vast knowledge and inspiring experience with us in today's webinar. First of all, I would like to say a big thank you to Dr. Rajendra Vaikadi for his tremendous presentation on the topic poverty, inequality, and changing identity, what it means to be poor in the global south. The way the topic was dealt and delivered was particularly interesting. So, you have really inspired us to do more in the academic inquiries. And also, I must mention our deep sense of appreciation to Dr. Sunil Kumar for all the effort taken to moderate the section. I also take the opportunity to thank everyone for their great involvement and their willingness to take on the completion of tasks beyond their comfort zone. A heartfelt thanks to everyone. Thank you all.
Thank you, Risa. It was a pleasure to have you all with us. Thank you all for attending this session. Before winding up, everyone fill up the feedback form provided in the chat box. Next session, paper presentation, will be begin at 2:30 p.m. We are ending the session. Thank you all.
Thank you and bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
so we'll keep in touch and thanks
Yes,
a lot.
sure. Sure.